Welcome. Welcome to the latest and greatest episode of Two Likeable Guys. I'm your co-host, Steve, with my fellow co-host,
Josh.
And together we are Two Likeable Guys. You can visit us at TwoLikeableGuys.com, and you can send us email at TwoLikeableGuys@gmail.com.
Or you can just come visit us in Red Bank.
Absolutely. You can come to Josh's house anytime you like.
Yeah, that's right. Doors always open.
Yeah. My dad was helping me out today, and we were painting on these cabinets. Get inside these cabinets of a work truck, and usually we use a white gloss. And I looked over and I said, "Hey, what are you using on that?" And he said, "It's a white satin." I said, "Oh," I said, "Are there knights in there?" Oh, that's ridiculous. But anyway, today we have an awesome, amazing show for you. We have Timothy and Tiffany Brown about an incident that took place about 10 years ago. They were on a trip to a little weekend getaway to Fall Creek Falls, and some awful thing happened, and but then some good comes out of it. So I mean, you just got to hear it. Maybe you remember it, maybe you don't. But if you do, it's awesome. It's an awesome story.
He wrote a book about it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The book is
The Miracle at Fall Creek Falls. Is that right?
The Miracle at Fall Creek Falls, about his son Caleb Brown. Yeah. So that's great. I mean, it's really it's you go through the gamut of emotions. I get emotional talking about it. They get emotional talking about it. But it's a story worth hearing, and I think you're going to love it. You think they're going to love it, Josh?
I thoroughly enjoyed it.
And I think it's good stuff. So let's just get into it and see what they have to say about it.
A little bit a recap of the accident, if that's not too painful. For maybe some of our listeners haven't heard, don't know the whole story, or maybe heard snippets of it when it happened. I remember for myself, I can remember the news stories coming out.
Mm-hmm.
And saying, this rock has fallen and hit this poor child, and I was like, well, I've been to Fall Creek Falls. I've walked down some of those trails. This could, I think this could have happened to me. And this could have happened to my family.
Right.
And I think that was one of the great things about it. The great things as far as making people know is, I think a lot of people can relate to the fact that you were just trying to. But anyway, I'll let you tell the story. Tell you, if you don't mind. I'd love to hear a little bit of just the story from the accident, probably just to the hospital, and then then we'll get in talking about the rehab and stuff, if you want.
Yeah, sure.
But
yeah. Well, Tiffany, how about I just start and I'll turn it over to you in just a minute.
Sure.
So, it was 2010, October the 16th. We had went on. It was going to be our first camping trip as a family, basically. Our boys were 4 and 2 at the time. Colby he's my oldest son, and Caleb was 2. And I had saved up just enough vacation time for one day. And we were going to go Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And that day was just like any other day. I mean, we got up that morning and we cooked breakfast over the stove, over the fire. And I remember teaching my boys baseball. We kind of made our homemade bases around the camp, and we were just having a fun day. It was just supposed to be a lazy day. And we went to the falls and just kind of made our way down. And, we were taking pictures along the way and stopping. And I remember Caleb, especially, he was kind of our adventurous one. And I remember he was so excited about trying to get to the bottom of the falls. He kept yanking on Mama's hand. And she was kind of a little bit nervous about, holding on to him. So I wound up holding his hand most of the way down just because I could get a, tighter grip. But he was just so so interested in nature and the falls and climbing over the rocks, and we were just having a really good time as a family. And then we got down to the bottom, and we were kind of making our way over to where the water was, and we were going to let the kids take off their shoes and whatnot. And when we got to the bottom, that's when I gave Caleb back to my wife, and she picked him up. And then I started making my way down with Colby, and that's when we heard the sound. It was like it almost sounded like a cannon going off, because we were down in the gorge, and it just echoed all around, and we knew, instantly. It's kind of like one of those moments where time slows down, right? There's a lot of things happening all at once, but it all happens in a split second. We knew that there was a rock fall. We knew that it was coming, and when we all froze and looked up, we were all watching the tree line from above, because we didn't know where it would come out from. So everyone down there, and there was probably 15, 20 people at the bottom at the time, and there was just a bunch of people there that day. It was very crowded. And Tiffany, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
I'll let you, I guess, take over, because you were holding him when what happened next. So I'll let you take over here.
Well, am I supposed to speak of any like supernatural?
Whatever you want to.
100%
Okay.
anything you want to talk about.
Okay, well, so Tim talks about how we heard the only thing that it could be described as, and I think I said this in the video, I'm not sure, but is that it sounded like a rock slide. And I'd never been in a rock slide before or around a rock slide before. I just couldn't describe it as anything other than this booming, like Tim said, this booming noise, but it sounded like lots of rocks, So as a mom, I was holding Caleb, and I knew that we were in danger, but I didn't know where the danger was, because here we are with the cliffs on one side, the water below, and on the other side is the rest of the cliffs. You know what I mean? Like, mountains are on
Right.
both sides, and then the
Right.
water's right in front, and you're just like, I know there's danger. As a mom, my intuition was something's about to happen, and I need to protect my child. So I went to bend over him, like put him under me, because he was on my hip, when I was turning him to put him under me. And as I did that, as I went to envelop over him, I heard as if somebody was yelling it at the top of their lungs. I just can't even describe it any more than I thought somebody was yelling at me to turn. And
Wow.
it was a voice that you could not disobey. Like, it was so strong that I was like, okay.
Right.
And so I lift up and I start to turn Caleb. And as I turn, I kind of step back a little bit, and then I turn. Well, gentlemen, what's so amazing about that is that the investigators that investigated the accident and saw where the rock fell, where it landed after everything.
Right.
And then the people that were behind us and the people that were in front of us, everything combined, they said to me, if you had not stepped back, it would have hit both of you, like square on. You guys both would have been hit.
Wow.
Number one, so it would have killed you and him. And then number two was it grazed his head. Like, so when I was turning him, instead of the rock hitting him full on, it grazed his head, and
Right.
which kept him alive. So I fully believe that the Lord saved mine and my son's life that day. And
Well, how big was the rock? I think you talk about it a little bit in the book.
No, okay, yeah. So it wasn't a rock; it was a boulder.
It was about the
It
size
was,
of a beach ball, is what they told
yeah.
us.
They said about what 30 or 40 pounds
They carried
at
it back
least.
up when they did the
Yeah.
police investigation. They found it and carried it back up, but it was yeah, it
Of
was
course,
really
it was in
good
pieces too.
size.
There were some pieces
Yeah.
that came off of it, but anyways, and so the part that Tim had gotten to was, there was a gentleman there that basically, I mean, there's no other way to describe it, and rescued our son, saved his life, ran him up to the top. And when we got to the top, it was just unbelievable, because literally there was people that had to, Tim and I were in such shock that, and I won't get into it, but there were things that happened before the accident that we didn't realize was preparing us for this. But
Right.
I don't think there's ever a time that you can actually, like, I don't think there's a way that you can prepare parents, right? Like, for this kind of trauma. But at the same time, it was like it wasn't a complete surprise. And I was even looking at Tim and saying, is this what you were talking about? And we won't,
So,
I don't
Right.
know if we even have time to go into all of
well,
that,
so
but
just to back
Well,
up
you're,
just a little bit. Go ahead.
yeah. Go ahead. I was going to say the what we're really talking about in this is the book, and the book is called "God Still Speaks: The Miracle at Fall Creek Falls,"
mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm.
the book is amazing. I mean, the way it describes. I'm curious. I know that Timothy, Mr. Timothy Brown, is credited as the author, but I'm guessing that Tiffany Brown had a lot to do with the book as well. Am I right? Or is that just crazy talk?
No, we had many conversations about the book and what should be included and how it should be written. So yeah, she was with me every step of the way.
And well, then that's the pretty amazing thing. Just the whole book itself. I mean, and talk about the getting to talk about the stuff that happened before, and the premonitions or the warnings,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
the prophetic callings, whatever you how you define it. I see it as God speaking to you guys, and if you
Yes.
want to, I'd love to hear a few of those about the going in, and then we'll get back to the what happens next, and definitely I don't want to leave out Michael Taggart, because it sounds like, from reading the book and everything, it sounds like he was an integral part
He
of getting
was.
Caleb to
Absolutely.
safety.
So
Mm-hmm.
so as the book begins, I talk about the fact that I've been a minister in the Churches of Christ for 20 years, and for those who are part of that faith tradition, there is a particular doctrine that the mainline Churches of Christ tend to hold to, and that's the doctrine of cessationism, which basically teaches that God was active and he spoke in the first century, but after the first century, that was it, and that's what I taught for years as a part of what I had been taught, and that's what I always believed, that God did a lot of miracles in the first century, but people who claim to hear God today, they're kind of crazy. That's kind of what the way I thought. And in 2009, that completely changed for myself. And in 2009, I won't go into all the detail, but basically, I heard God speak out loud, audibly in the room as I was waking up one morning. And this was a year before the accident actually happened. So the voice that I heard in the room that morning said to me, "You are going to need your whole heart for what's coming." And that started a long series of dominoes that began to fall, where we started having dreams that would later come true. And then later on, we started having visions that would also that would start to come true. And fast forward a year later, you mentioned some premonitions. What was it, Tiffany? Was it like a couple of days before we were about to leave to go on the trip?
Yeah, it was a few days before.
Yeah, my father gives me a call, and at the time, my dad was not. He wasn't going to church. He wasn't really into spiritual things
God, yeah.
at that time in his life. But he called me up and he said, "Is something wrong? Are you okay?" And I
Is
said,
everybody okay? Yeah.
"Yeah." He just said, "I have this this overwhelming feeling that something bad's about to happen or that something bad has happened. So he was calling everybody that night. This was the night before we were about to leave to go on our trip, and was saying, are you okay? Is something wrong? Is something wrong? Well, that threw red flags up with me because I had already started hearing from God. And at that point, I had not really been talking to anybody about it because I just hadn't had that sense of
Right.
openness yet with other people except my wife. And so I started having that sense that maybe something was wrong. And then the very next day, as we were trying to start making preparations to go on the trip, it was as if literally every single thing was trying to get in the way of us going on that trip. And of course, I'm sure you read some parts of that in the book.
Yes. That's in my notes here.
Yeah.
We can get into that in a minute, but that was definitely in my notes about how I related to the feelings of guilt because you saw so many signs that said
Oh, yeah.
stop, don't go, and because I can relate to that because I can see things like where it'd be like, oh, I would beat myself up for not listening and I think of that daily whenever something, oh, well, does this mean that? And then you just kind of got to pray about it and keep going and do what you think is best, but you get to learn that voice. But anyway, please continue.
Well, I was just going to fast forward to Michael Taggart. You mentioned him a moment ago. So
Right.
as we were going down the falls, we had no idea that God had already lined up several key things that were going to happen that day that was going to add up to our son being saved. Now, we didn't know it at the time, but the young man that was walking right behind us, him and his family, the Taggart family, we found out much later on that basically his mother and father had almost forced him to go. He had no interest in going to Fall Creek Falls that day. He was an EMT in training. He was a firefighter, young man, and I think he was 20 years old, very, very strong. And when the accident happened, when Caleb was initially hit by the rock, he had a very large opening in the back of his skull, and he was bleeding out. That was one of the first things that we were struggling with. Was I was trying to hold him correctly. I didn't know how to hold him correctly. I was in shock. We were trying to run him back up the trail. We had just taken 45 minutes to get down the trail. And now we were faced with, oh my goodness, he's going to choke, he's going to bleed out, and there's no way we can get him back up. Everyone was trying to use their cell phones to call. Nobody could get through because we were down in the gorge. And I remember as we were running back up with him, people were yelling and screaming, try to call 911, try to call 911. And as far as that voice would carry back up the gorge, you had people that were literally trying to get as high as they possibly could to get out the 911 call. But as I was going up, I was slipping, falling on rocks and whatnot. And this young man knew exactly what to do. So he wound up taking my son. He held his head correctly. He ran him in 15 minutes back up to the top of the trail. And what we didn't know is that by the time he got to the top of the trail, there just so happened to be a pediatric trauma nurse from Vanderbilt that was walking by at that very moment. There was another doctor from another part of town that was there at that very moment. There were two nurses that were there from a different hospital that were there at that very moment. And so by the time that we got to the top, you literally had like a whole, triage unit that was there working on our son.
Wow.
But here's the key thing that I found out much later. And Tiffany, this is something I'm sure you probably remember when I was talking to Michael Taggart about this. The doctor fellow, and I don't know who he was, and God bless him, but he was saying, we need to get him in a car and we need to get him to the hospital now. We found out later that the Piney Fire Department was actually doing a training on clear the other side of the county, so it was going to be probably another hour before they could even get there. They were trying to
15 minutes.
They were trying to figure out how to get life flight down there. So the doctor and some of the other people were like, well, we need to get him out. Michael Taggart knew exactly what to do. He was choking on his own blood. He kept our son alive for 50 minutes until the life flight arrived. God knew exactly the right young man who needed to be there at the right moment, who had received the exact right amount of training to be able to keep him alive as he did.
Yeah, because the other ones, everybody was saying different things. Like he said,
everybody was arguing. Everybody was so
you need
scared.
to turn him over. You need to put him in the car. You need to, all these different things. And Michael, I guess it's because there was something about Michael. I mean, he's the one that ran him up to the top. That Tim was like, "We're going to do what he says."
Yeah.
And as soon as he turned him over, he vomited and started to breathe.
He was able to keep his airway clear.
Yeah.
Wow, that is just, I mean, it gives me chills now. One of the things I remember in the book is how when you got to the top, you were probably I think you were expecting, paramedics and an ambulance and these people to be there, but they weren't there.
Yeah,
but
we were devastated. We kept saying, "Where's the help? Like, where's our help?"
And I think it was probably. Oh, I was just going to say, I was thinking we probably had waited no more than 10, 15 minutes, and people were screaming out, "Where are they? Where are they?" And that's when everybody just started to pray. I mean, there was probably 200 people there that had gathered at the top, and I mean, hands were lifted, people were praying, people were crying.
People were laying hands on Caleb.
Yeah.
That is just, I mean, it's moving. It's the things that were put into place for that accident to happen, for Michael Taggart to be right there, right behind you, and have the exact amount of training needed to keep him alive and get him to the top, where there was a pediatric trauma nurse. I mean, you couldn't have planned a better team to be there. I mean, there's no way that was coincidental. I mean, people can say what they want, but God was involved, in my opinion. God was involved, and he had this all mapped out for this awesome little boy. And I think one of the reasons it hits so close to home to me, I have a 2-year-old boy right now. He's 2 years and 3 months, and I think about him and I can't even imagine what you guys went through. I mean, it's just, but what gave me a really good idea is the book was so well written that I was on the edge of my seat. I mean, I knew the story, I'd seen the Facebook stuff. I believe I was one of the first Facebook, not one of the first, but I was in the initial Facebook group to pray for Caleb when he was initially in the hospital and was in Chattanooga and that, because it's always that story, but it didn't hit home to me until I had my child. And then that's when it became very, very real. But we got there. So finally, did they, how far away did the life flight land from the top of the falls?
So they took Caleb to T.C. Thompson and down at Erlanger.
Well, they landed in the parking lot.
Yeah, they landed in the parking lot, and they took him down to Erlanger in Chattanooga, and that's where we wound up going. And there's a little bit of a story there too. When we were in the hospital in the pediatric trauma care unit, I think we were there for just a few days, and one of the nurses came out and said to us, she goes, "You're really lucky that you came here." And I said, "Why is that?" She goes, "Well, because we literally just got through having a special training here at TC Thompson for brain injury cases for children."
For head trauma.
And she said, "Caleb is our first case, our first live case after the training."
So we were kind of like, oh, you're feeling multiple emotions at that point.
Yeah, and there was just little things like that you kind of, me and my wife, we've come to call them God's fingerprints. A scripture that was impressed upon us on the way down when we were praying was Psalm 91:11, where it says that God will give his angels charge over you. And that scripture was something that my wife and I were just praying and praying and praying and praying and praying. And after we were at CC Thompson for the first, I think, couple nights, they put us over at the Ronald McDonald House across the street. And our first
Right.
day, I walked into the Ronald McDonald House, went into the restroom, went to splash some water on my face, and right below the mirror was a plaque that had Psalm 91:11 written on it right there. Out of all the scriptures, it was the one that we were praying the most for Caleb, and it was right there.
And then my mom told us when she got to the hospital, I prayed, and without us saying anything, you know, she said, I prayed Psalm 91 all the way here. And we were just like, man,
that scripture kept coming out over and over
again with many different people that, you know, we didn't even know. We had somebody make us a big poster, and right in the middle of that poster was that scripture. And so it was just like, there was no denying that God was with us, and there was no denying that God wanted us to know, hey, I see you, I hear you, I'm talking to you. Like, yeah. There was no denying it.
So I know when you got, well, from the book, I know that you, the first few nights were horrible to try to, you know, manage your expectations and what was happening and whether Caleb was going to live. What happened? How did you guys manage? I mean, did you just keep praying? Was there a lot of people that talked you through it and walked you through it? I know whenever you talked to the doctors, that was extremely scary. For me, reading it in the book, I was like, you know, and I even know the rough ending to this story, but even when I was hearing and reading when you had the meetings with the doctors about his progress and what his prognosis was, can you talk would you mind talking a little bit about that? About how they
Tiffany, do you want to jump in there?
I was just gonna say that I was in shock, but I think also had this happened like a few years before that, I don't know how I would have done. I think it would have just killed me. I think it just would have, not that it wasn't very emotional and very hard, but I was in a different place than I would have been a few years ago. And in my heart and in my prayer, I told the Lord, I said, you know, he is, and it's funny because we had just, right before we got out of the car to go down to the falls, we had just had a prayer, and I had had a conversation with our children, with Colby and Caleb, and said to them, this is God's handiwork. This is his creation. We want to bring you here so you can enjoy it. And I looked at them and I said, you know how much Mommy and Daddy love you?
Yeah.
I said, God loves you more.
Yeah.
And
that is you said that in the video, and that's when my mom, when we were listening to it on the way back today, that's when she lost it. She and I because my mother has been my my who to look up to for godly acting and how to behave or manage in a godly way about biblical principles and things to that effect. And she, when she said, did the little boy say that God loves me too? You know, God loves me more right after that. And I was like, I believe so. It's and it's just an amazing testament. Amazing.
When I said that before we got out to go to the falls, when I said that, after everything happened and I was in we were in the hospital, I was reminded of that. I remembered that. And I said, Lord, he is yours and you do love him more than I do. And he is a gift. And I said, if you choose to take him back with you, I will serve you. Yeah. And if you choose to leave him here, I will serve you. And I knew that I meant that, and I never thought I would be able to say that. Um, and I know that it was the Lord that gave me that peace, because that piece is definitely not of me. I can't tell you how many people we talked to that were just like, your faith and the peace that you have, I just don't even understand it. And I looked at him and I said, neither do I, because it's not mine.
It was a supernatural thing. We both felt like we were being carried through that experience. We don't feel like we walked through it. We felt like we were being carried through it.
Yes.
And that I don't know what the Bible verse is, but that there's a Bible verse that there's grace for every season, or something to that extent, and that's what I believe. Because I think about when I've had people close to me, like a great aunt that passed or something. I didn't know how I was going to deal with it, and it scared me before it happened. But going through it, there's a certain grace for that season. If you believe in God and you believe and obey His commands, that it lets you just get through it, and it's nothing that we can do. It's a grace that knows no bounds, knows no, it has no reason. It's just something that God lets us have, thankfully. I mean, because I think we'd have a lot of crazy people running around if it wasn't for God's grace. Just saying that I don't.
We were also experiencing God's grace through a lot of very key people that He was placing in our lives at that time too, that were giving us reminders of things that we needed to remember, that were, helping bear the weight of the struggle and the worry and the pain. There were many more fingerprints where God would continually remind us that He was there, and that this is bigger than just your pain. There's other things at play here and in the community. And that helped a lot too, to see God's hand moving through all of it.
Absolutely. And it didn't matter what church we were from, or what denomination or who we were. It was just, people were so kind, and they wanted to help, and they prayed, and
I remember.
Oh, go ahead, honey.
Well, I was just going to say, I remember at one point I had a Baptist minister, a Seventh-day Adventist preacher, and a Pentecostal preacher all praying over my son at one time.
Yeah, and somebody keeps telling me there's not separate rooms in heaven. So the people that think they're gonna be there alone, I've always remembered there was a joke that said you got to be real quiet when you walk past this door in heaven, because there's whoever, they don't think anybody else is up here.
Yeah, they think they're the only ones. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I was raised that way. Tim, did you tell them about? And I mean, I guess you've already heard it, but there was even to the point that the campground that we finally were able to get into, and I mean, we tried so many different campgrounds, but we finally got into this campground, and just so happened to be camping right next to Jason McKay
yeah.
Was it Scott, or who was the one that was with Jason? Was it not Scott Arnold, or was it somebody else, Tim?
It was somebody else.
Okay, it was somebody else. Scott Arnold was later in the picture. So Jason McKay, though, was part of the media. He's the one that came and was like, hey, can we do an interview? This is somebody we just camped next door to and saw briefly, like the next morning. And so even down to who was at our campground with us played an instrumental part.
Yeah, so what she's talking about is when we wanted to get the word out about prayer. And so he took the reins and really just got the word out about prayer. So he was working with the local Christian radio station, and that's when it just blew up, and the whole community of Chattanooga was praying for Caleb at one point.
Did he let you borrow wood or to
Yeah.
help you start a
Or
fire?
Eric's hair dryer.
Yeah, I'm not exactly known as the best outdoorsman in the world. So he saw me, Colby, and Caleb trying to start a campfire, and he comes walking over with a hair dryer and says, "Here, this is how I get it going." And so he put the hair dryer underneath it and helped us get our fire going. So
Made Tim feel so much better.
yeah.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I remembered that in the book. I couldn't remember if he had brought wood or something, but I remember there was something there, and he played an integral part with the radio station here, the Christian radio station here in Chattanooga, and getting the rest of the word out for people to pray. How long was Caleb in at TC Thompson?
He was there for about a month, right, Tiffany?
Yeah, right about a month.
Yeah.
When did you feel like he was going to make it, and things were going to progress? Was that?
That was about 2 weeks, Tim.
Yeah, about 3 weeks into it.
2 or 3 weeks.
We had to get through the brain swelling period, which took a lot longer than they originally thought it would be. They were thinking 3 to 5 days, and Caleb's brain swelled for a good probably 7 days or so before we knew what was going to happen as far as the brain swelling was concerned. And when that ended, he was still in a medically induced coma, and we went through a period of worrying about his kidneys and his lungs. He had infection in his lungs. His kidneys were failing. It just had all kinds of problems that were going on. And so it was just day after day after day, slowly watching one little thing improve over another. We got through the brain swelling, and then finally once that looked like that was going to be okay, they started working on the lungs, and then finally his kidney started functioning correctly, and just one thing after another. And then finally we got to a point where they said, okay, we think he's through the worst of it. We think he's going to live. And that was about 2.5, 3 weeks into it. And that's when they started pulling the medicine off to see how much damage had actually been done to his brain. So
that was very scary.
That was definitely hard. Yeah, that was definitely hard. And
because he was still in a coma and not medically induced coma, and so you don't really know what to think. You definitely don't know how long that's going to last, and it's just prayer and what happened next?
Yeah, so they bring him back off the medicine, and they basically said, okay, what you see is what you get. This is where we are. And when he came out of the coma, there's a coma scale. It's not black and white like you think about in the movies where you're all of a sudden out of a coma. There's kind of a scale. So even though they had lifted him out of the medically induced coma, he was still in a coma as far as his brain and what he was able to do. But he lost everything. I mean, it was like having a newborn baby all over again, and in some ways even worse, because he was displaying what was called neurostorming at the time, where his brain was just the way they described it, it was like a computer that's having a hard time rebooting, basically.
Right. Like there was a time we couldn't go in and see him because it was making it worse.
Yeah, that was during the time of the brain swelling. It was making it worse, right?
Okay.
So it could be too much stimulation. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Early on, when the brain was swelling, there was a period of time where we couldn't even go in, and it was because of that very reason. And then later on, when he came out of the coma, he was not able to walk. He wasn't able to talk. He was almost entirely blind. And that's when I lost it personally as someone, because by that time I had it just playing in my mind that God was going to do this, and this big miraculous thing, and he was just going to wake up and walk out and jump in my arms, and that did not happen. And so that was very, very devastating and hard for me personally at that point. But then God was good. I mean, he continued to do good things after that. So
the part of the book that I was on the edge of my seat, is he going to live? And how much damage is there, and what's going to happen next? And then finally we in the book you go through and you realize that he's going to live. We don't know you don't know as a reader, you don't know what's going to happen next because you don't know how much damage there is. And then
Right.
you find he starts making these progress, these small little progress, and you get accepted into the rehab program at the Scottish Rite.
Yeah.
And
So,
and it,
so yeah, go ahead.
no, and it seems like from there, the steps start moving, not a lot faster, but you can start seeing the things happen. Within just, I would say, from what I read, from what I remember, I think it was, you could see things happen. A change in Caleb weekly, if not
That's right.
daily.
That's what was the most encouraging thing, because we were in a place on the third week. They were trying to get him into a couple of different places, and they were only, and I don't know if, I can't remember. I don't think this is in the book, but because there's so little minutia details that I remember through the whole story, but there was this one point where, because of our insurance the way that it was, because of the beds that were available in this place versus that place, there were certain criteria that Caleb had to be able to do in order to be accepted into that particular hospital. And so we were praying so hard, because there was this one hospital, it was the Scottish Rite, down in Atlanta, Georgia, that we just really wanted him to be a part of, but there were no beds available. And one of the criteria is that he had to show some ability to hold his own head up. He had to show some type of cognitive ability to for them to work with, basically, is the long story short. So on the fourth week that we were there, they brought in a physical therapist, and these were like the little things that we were putting out on Facebook, because by this time there were already thousands of people on his Facebook page, and the news was still reporting what was going on with him. And so every time we would have something like, here's what we need Caleb to do, we would just blast it out there to pray, and we started seeing things happen so quickly. I remember when they got Caleb up on the edge of his seat that day, and it was like 2 or 3 days before he was, they had to make a decision of whether or not he was going to be able to go to this place or that place. Well, it turned out Scottish Rite got a bed available, but Caleb had to prove himself. He had to prove himself. So they got him up, and when we got him up out of his bed, for the first time, he actually showed himself with the ability to hold his head back up again and actually use his muscles in a meaningful way. And that sealed the deal. That helped seal the deal to get him to go down to Scottish Rite.
I've had several. Well, I know of two people that I went to high school with. Have one you may know of. The son, because this was up in your neck of the woods. The guy that went to school with me, that I don't know him really well, but his name was David Bramble, and his
David
son
Bramble.
was Baylor Bramble. He had an accident. They had a head injury during a football game, and he ended up getting into, and I remember David writing out, please pray, that we get into the Scottish Rite. And so they did, and it seemed to really help him. And then I had another friend that lived near Atlanta, I think in Ackworth, and their son had a bicycle accident with head trauma, and I had learned a little bit about neurostorming just by reading it from how they described it. And when he got accepted into the Scottish Rite, it was a big deal. But evidently, the Scottish Rite is the place you need to be for progressive treatment in brain trauma.
It really is. And when Caleb started there, I remember the very first day, it was a whirlwind, because the doctors and nurses all came in, and they were checking him out, and setting him up, and it was amazing, because we didn't know what we were about to get involved with, but the doctors were looking at him like, wow, this kid's he's going to do good. He's going to be a great candidate for what we do here. And sure enough, I mean, by the next day, 24 hours later, we had a full schedule of therapy. And I think, Tiffany, like 6 or 8 goals that he had to meet for that week, for 7 days. And Caleb accomplished every single one of those goals within 2 more days.
Yeah,
Wow.
he
It was
he
rapid,
was
rapid.
surpassing every goal that they gave him. And one person, I mean, one doctor actually said, like, we're seeing miracles. Like it wasn't. It was like, this is abnormal to this degree that this child can do these things.
Yeah.
Let me see how can I phrase this. After he's in the Scottish Rite, he's making great progress. And it comes to a point where it seems like you guys were almost shocked that you were actually going to get to go home. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
in the book, it's like, oh my gosh, we're going to get to go home and we're going to get to be with our
Mhm.
family. And like, this is going to
And
be
before
great.
Christmas. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Because
And
so many people had been there longer. So many kids had been there longer. And, at first we were told, like, what, Tim, like 8 to 10 weeks or 8 to 12 weeks or something like that. And
Yeah, we were
it
told
had
it was
only
going to be a
been
lot
like
longer. Yeah.
3 weeks. And we were told, hey, you guys are going to get to go home. You're going to get to go home before Christmas. And so.
and this is a point I can't relate to what you the trauma and what all you had to do with Caleb, but I remember when I was at the hospital with my baby, uh, and we got to come home. I thought, oh great, we get to come home, and then you get home and you realize all the help you had at the hospital with all these different things, and now you have to do them all, and there's no one else to depend on. You can't, let the nurse
Oh, yeah.
take your baby for a couple hours to get a nap, and
Mhm.
and you're just, and it's like you describe it great in the book, and I can really relate, because you're like, oh my gosh, we have to deal with all this and our other children now, and
Yeah.
how are we going to do this?
Mhm.
And so, how did you manage?
Well, Tiffany, you want to speak to that a little bit?
Well, I think that one thing that was incredible is, and again, just people. There are still so many good people in this world, and
Yeah.
there was people that were just sending money over and over, just countless people. We would get cards with checks in them, and then we would get, we had a medical fund for Caleb. One of our relatives set up a medical fund for him, and people just flooded that medical fund, and it was just amazing. And
People
so
were bringing food and helping to sometimes
mhm,
babysit for us and help
we
watch the
had,
kids. And
yeah, we had people that we didn't even know, calling and messaging and saying, can I keep your kids for you so you can take Caleb to therapy and you don't have to take them all? Can I come do your laundry? Can we cook meals for you?
hmm
It was it was just amazing. It was, once again, it was just like God knew what we needed, and he made it happen to the point that we didn't even have a car that could fit Caleb with, because at first, when we first came home, we had a wheelchair, and we didn't even have a vehicle large enough for for him. And we had a friend actually approach us and say, what is your greatest need? And we were like, a vehicle. And we didn't even mean a new vehicle. We just meant a vehicle that would get us from point A to point B safely and be big enough. And
Right.
Right.
I would never forget when he called Tim and he said, hey, we just need you to come sign these papers, get the title, whatever. And it was a year-old minivan. Like, I mean, it was
That's
brand
amazing.
new.
That's great.
Yeah, it's perfect for the
So
family.
I mean, God's providence was just all over the place. And when we got home, it was also to the degree that, like, our house had to be a certain way. When Caleb came home, they're like, you need this and this and this and this, and very, very clean. And when we came home, our house had been newly painted. The carpet had been ripped up. Wood had been put down. It was like a new house. Like we were walking into a new house. You just can't even. And those things, in the grand scheme of things, those things they don't matter. But at the same time, they did. They just took a huge load off of us. It was just, yeah.
It's just amazing.
So much.
I absolutely love hearing that. I mean, everybody loves a good story, and it helps restore faith in humanity. It
Yeah.
really does.
Absolutely.
How did your well, there's a couple different. Well, let's go with this one first. There's a couple different areas. I want to talk a little bit about how your marriage, because I think
Mhm.
you said the statistic in the book of how many marriages don't make it through, and
Mhm.
how you guys pushed through with that, and decided, you would, because I just can't I can imagine, with my wife, if something like this happened, I can imagine, I can see us being, on each other's nerves, and then I can see us trying to work through it. I mean, just in my head, it seems a lot like how you guys did it. But how did you manage?
Tim, do you want to?
Yeah.
Oh,
So I think that one of the things that God was doing in the midst of all of it, and there were so many things. So my best friend Todd Jacobs, I never will forget a conversation he and I had in the chapel down at Scottish Rite about what was happening and all of the God activity that had been going on. And I remember looking at him and I said, Todd, what do you think God's doing in the midst of all of this? And he answered back to me and he said, I think God's doing a lot of things. And I never will forget that, because he was. And one of the things that he was doing is he was working on some things in my wife and I's marriage that we needed to work through. There were things that had been going on prior to the accident that needed attention, that my wife and I
mhm.
were not giving it the attention that it needed. It was just kind of one of those things where we're so caught up in life that we just kind of neglect each other and we sweep things under the rug and not deal with what needs to be dealt with. Well, I'll tell you, when you go through a traumatic event like that, those things come to the surface really quick. And
Absolutely.
Right.
yeah, Pat Pearson was the nurse that came to us that day, and she's the one that when we were about to be discharged to go down to Scottish Rite, she pulled us aside and she said, "Listen," she goes, "You two have been through a lot. I want you to know that most marriages, I'm saying this because I love you," and she was a woman of faith. She is a woman of faith till this day. She said, she goes, "I just want you to know that most marriages to go through what you're about to go through do not make it." She said, "You're going to need each other now more than you have ever needed each other. So keep looking to God no matter what." And I never will forget her, because she not only cared about our son, but she cared about us. And that was just so amazing. Her and several others that were there during that time. But she was right. I mean, when we got home, we had the meals prepared for us. The car was provided. There were so many things that were provided for us. But slowly, as those weeks began to tick by, and those things had this, we started taking over responsibility for the 10, 12 doctor's appointments every single week that we had to go to, and
And the
what
cooking and the cleaning and the.
cooking and the cleaning, and how to take care of a child who's just learning how to walk, and
Mhm.
constantly living in this fear of, oh my gosh, if my child falls, he could die. I mean, that's literally what they told us. If he falls, he could die. So you're walking with your child everywhere, as he's learning how to walk again, and hoping and praying every moment that he does not fall. And just that pressure really brought me and my wife to a point where we felt like we weren't going to make it as a couple, because it just seemed like, I don't know, how would you describe it, Tiffany? It was just like
It was just this overwhelming. Well, so Tim kind of mentioned it before, but we took the trip because we genuinely needed it, because
yeah,
our family, our marriage needed it. We were like, we need this time away to regroup. Um, and so when all this happened, it kind of it forced us together. Like he said, it forced
yeah,
us to work on things that it was really hard, because we were still dealing with things that we were working through from before the accident with each other.
yeah,
And so it was like I was reaching out to some girlfriends, and he was, like he said, he was reaching out to his best friend Todd. And And so at first we were kind of like, and I think that's why Pat Pearson said this, because she could see that we were going our separate ways. Like I was over here with this friend trying to work things out, and he was over here with his friend, and we weren't coming together. And really, I mean, other than for Caleb, does that make sense? Other than like as parents, we were coming together because we had to, because we knew that, you know, that's what we had to do. But as a couple, we were on opposite ends of the spectrum, and not, you know, we loved each other. And so when we got home, it was so much pressure that we were running and going and literally almost like roommates, you know, because we didn't have the time to talk to each other, and we were barely seeing each other. And even though he was at home writing the book and taking care of the kids that I had left from not having to take them all to therapy at the same time, it still was just like I said, like roommates, like, you know, he's here and I'm here. And then we were going through all of our emotions about everything. That new year, I'll never forget, after Christmas, that new year, we were supposed to go out for New Year's, and we were talking in the kitchen, and we had just been fighting all day long. And we looked at each other and we were just like, we can't do this anymore. Like we're done. We're unfortunately going to become one of these statistics, because we just, and we, like I said, we loved each other, but there was just nothing in us to try anymore.
It felt impossible.
It felt impossible. Yes, it felt impossible. It was like, here we have all these responsibilities. We don't have time to try to figure us out.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we talked about divorce, and and we had both said, okay, we're done. We're going to look at getting a divorce. And I walked out of the kitchen. As I was walking down the hallway, again, there's a voice like inside of me, and my heart. You want to call it? You want to call it my heart? You want to call it my soul? Whatever you want to call it, said to me, "No, you're not getting a divorce." Walk back in that kitchen. So I turned around, walked back in the kitchen, and I said, "Well, man," I was like, "Lord just told me that we can't get a divorce. So I guess we're gonna have to work it out." So that was like the turning point for us. But it was, I mean, I'm not kidding when I say, like, because there was nothing in me at that point that wanted to work it out. Neither did Tim. We were both just exhausted and done. And when I heard that, though, I was like, are you kidding me? But then I was also, that was the turning point. We went out that night by ourselves and had a long talk and kind of started from there.
Yeah.
You know?
It's just amazing, the whole spectrum of from the accident to the dealing with the people, God's fingerprint on the accident and on the people that were there and the people that took care of you, all the way to your marriage, and how it seems like from the book, it seems like once you realized, it brought everything together and it all was orchestrated. It's like a symphony. And you've got these little sounds over here, and you've got these other sounds in them. But once it all comes together, it's like the most beautiful sound, the beautiful relationship that you can have. And I think that it was all God inspired. I can't see any other.
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
What you just described was the very conversation we had that night when we decided to go out and have our day anyway. And what we did is we sat there in that car, and I remember Tiffany and I we remembered something that God had spoken to us prior to the accident. And it was about our marriage, and it was when we were still dealing with a lot of stuff. And he made it very clear, do not look at the outward feelings and emotions. Look at the heart. Look at the why behind what's going on in your marriage, and stop, assuming and justifying your own reactions and whatnot, but really look at the heart issues of why you're feeling the way you're feeling and why you're doing what you're doing or why you think the other person is doing what they're doing. And so we just sat there, and we basically just spoke about the book. There was no book at the time, but we spoke about the story and
Right.
all the fingerprints and everything that God had been doing. And we both knew that God was doing something much, much bigger through all of this than even just Caleb or just me or our family or whatnot. And that's when my wife and I came to the conclusion that this was a spiritual warfare,
Mm-hmm.
and that there would be nothing more that the enemy would like to see, that in the end our family be destroyed because of this. And that's when we dug our heels deep in our faith in God and said, you know what, we're not going to be that statistic, and we are going to work through this, and it is going to be for God's glory. And that changed everything from that day forward.
Yeah, I agree.
And your story reminds me, bring it back biblically, in some ways, not in all, but the story of Job. When Job had everything taken away from him, I realize you didn't have everything taken away from you, but you had a lot taken from you at the time of the accident. And now I want to talk a little bit about that was then, and you had the two boys, and you had three children at the time of the accident, correct?
Yes. We had
three, yeah.
Connor, that was 7 months old, and he stayed with my sister at the time, so he didn't go camping with us. And then we had Colby, who was 4 years old, who was with us, and that's a whole nother story. That poor child. That's a whole nother story.
He's had his own journey.
We were separated from him and Camden because of us both.
Well, you mean Connor?
Both of us. Oh, Connor. I'm sorry, Connor.
Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, we've had two other children since then.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I was getting at. So now there is 5 of you. So you were restored into it. 5 children rather. So there's 7 of you all together. You almost have your baseball team, by the way.
That's true. Yeah.
So we actually do have a baseball team because we have a bonus child as well, which is our son's best friend that has lived with us for 2 years.
We took in another young man 2 years ago,
so
we actually do have that many now.
Yeah, we do.
That's amazing. So I mean, it's just looks like all this. How is I just love how it came around, and you kept, it didn't keep you from more children, which I think in a way, to me it seems like, well, gosh, you went through this. I mean, I would, in a sense, you're like, well, you're scared that something could happen again, and you don't want to go through that, and you don't want to have a child have to go through that.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like you kind of just let that go to God, and said, well, we're still going to live our lives, and we know God's going to take care of us.
Absolutely.
And so now you have this big, beautiful family, and I want to know how Caleb is today. What's he like today?
Go ahead, Tiffany.
I know he probably doesn't remember.
First of all, go ahead. He does remember, actually.
Does he really?
Yeah, there's things that he says every now and then. Tim, how many years ago was it when he just out of nowhere in the kitchen came and said, a rock hit me and there was thunder and lightning and Jesus carried me?
He did. He had a very, very strange, lucid moment. Caleb, by the way, he is 13 years old now, and he goes to junior high school. He goes to special needs classes. Just by looking at him, you would never know that anything ever happened to him, but he does have learning delays. But yeah, what Tiffany's referring to was several years ago. He came into the kitchen. I can't remember how many years ago now. It's been quite a while. But he started saying things very, very strangely. He mentioned, he said something about the rock hitting me, and I said, "Yeah, buddy, do you remember about that?" And I kind of thought that he was maybe remembering things that we had said over, picking up conversations and whatnot. And then he said, "Yeah, Dad, I remember." He goes, "I remember that there was thunder and lightning, and Jesus was there, and he carried me. Jesus carried me, and he took care of me."
Oh my.
Wow.
And and that was and that just blew us away.
Yeah, because we never said anything. We've never said anything to where he would hear. First of all, we've never mentioned like lightning and thunder.
Yeah, I
with
don't know what
it.
all that's about, right?
Right.
And then never mentioned Jesus carrying him. We have said Jesus, saved him, God saved him, but never like Jesus carrying him. And the way that he described it was like he literally felt like Jesus picked him up out of the water and carried him.
Yeah, that's the way he described it.
That is beautiful. That is. Do you still keep? I know you did to the point of the book. Do you still keep in touch with Michael Taggart?
We do. Michael has his own child now, and he has a little boy, beautiful little boy, and we're friends on Facebook, and we chit chat every now and then.
That is
he
beautiful.
Actually lives in a complex that I clean for. He actually lives over there in that complex. So.
Oh wow! So he lives close to you guys.
Yes,
yeah, lives here in Gallatin, Tennessee.
Did he live there when during the accident? Was that where he was from then, or did he move there, or?
I don't know.
I believe so. I think he lived somewhere near here because at that time, Tim, we were in Nashville.
That's true. Remember? We lived in Antioch at the time.
Yeah. And he drove like 45 minutes that day of Caleb's birthday or something.
Yeah.
It was probably around here.
And I want everybody to know that everything that we've talked about, well, 99% of everything we've talked about is in the book. The book to me is on the lines of any other of the great, if you've seen any of the great Christian stories where, there's, I'm drawing a blank, but 90 Minutes in Heaven, where the one with Colton Bolt,
Heaven is for real. Yes. And Tim actually talked to his dad.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we had a chance to meet actually the Burpo family after everything that happened, and it was really neat. We were able to have some interesting points of contact with them. So yeah, that was neat.
But because I don't see why that Caleb's story and your story is not a blockbuster worthy hit. Much like Heaven is for Real, or the one where the child falls through the ice, gets trapped under the ice.
Yes.
Breakthrough. Thank you. I'm so. But any of those movies, this book is on par with all of those books, and should be as popular as those books. And I think in time, I think it'll catch on eventually. I know it's been a while since it was released, but it is an amazing book. It is truly amazing. The way it's written, the way you go through everything, the order of events. I mean, I was gripped by the story initially, and then kind of forgot about it. And then I think I saw a post on the Caleb page several months ago, maybe not. I don't. And it reminded me. It was like, oh, and you said you still had some books, and I was like, oh my gosh, I want to read this story. When I got the book, I could not put it down. I mean, it is that good. It is every bit as good of any New York bestseller out there. It's just a wonderful story, and I cannot say enough good things about it. I mean, because it is a great story. I want to
God's story. It's God's story for sure.
Oh, and I love that. That is pretty special because it's a story of faith. I mean, it's a story of hope, faith, hope, and love. I mean, you'll see that through there. And I mean, we talked a little bit about it, but if you don't get the full, you get little snippets. This is kind of like the Cliff Note version of the story. If you want to get really deep into the story, read the book. It is amazing. I think it's a journey that you'll be blessed with reading and in your own life. I think everybody can relate to some form of that in that book in yourself, in what you do in your life, in your everyday life. And I don't know. You're very welcome. No, thank you for writing it. And I'm sorry you had to go through it, but I absolutely loved the way it turned out. I absolutely love that Caleb made it, and I saw a video and of Caleb just where he was drawing a card. He is an amazing young man, truly amazing young man, and I think he's going to do great things. I think he's already made his impact on the world. And I think he will keep doing that as he gets older, as well as the rest of the family. I don't want to leave the other kids out because they have to be amazing, amazing kids. I wanted to touch on this, and I don't know that we'll want to. I was kind of wondering if this is one of the things I kept wondering about, and I know you touch on this in the book. Um, was it deliberate? Did the rock fall deliberately? And I know what the book said, and
Right.
and does it matter to you now that if it was or wasn't deliberate, and what do you know or what do you think?
So we were told from the investigators that it was there was one eyewitness that came forward that day. And they said that when they were going around, if you've ever been to Fall Creek Falls, there's two trails you can take. One goes around the top of the falls to the right, and the other one goes down to the bottom of the falls to the left. And so there was a gentleman that was hiking around the top ridge around the falls, and he said that when he came around the corner, he witnessed two teenagers that were like laying up against the ground, and they were using their legs to dislodge that little boulder. And he said right when he came around the corner is when he saw the rock fly off the edge, and that's when the screaming started, and those two kids ran off. So, it was a couple of teenagers that were trying to splash the water below. And my wife and I don't think that they had any malice whatsoever. But
Right, because they
Right.
actually said to the gentleman, "Oh, are there people down there?"
yeah, they had no idea. They were just a couple of kids playing around and made a bad mistake.
I wonder if they had kept up with the story. I know we don't know, but
Yeah.
I've always wondered, if they ever. I wonder, I wonder if they follow the Caleb Facebook page. I kind of wonder
I wondered the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
uh,
Because they
because
had to have known.
or were they too young to know? I mean, I know they were supposed to be teenagers and around that age, but maybe they were just not old enough to really realize what was going on and didn't follow the
True.
news, or
Yeah, could be.
Yeah.
but you, and again, you touch on that in the book, which is really it helped give me closure to the story, um, for that aspect of it. There's a couple other things I want to touch on. Number one is you, with your newfound faith, that you're believing that these were God inspired events and God was speaking to you. You lost your job,
That's true.
and how did you respond to that? I mean, were you like dumbfounded? Were you like, oh, what's going on?
Well, which time? I lost it twice. So
Oh,
Before the
well,
accident and after.
the first time was right after the book, after I was writing the book, and I went and spoke to our church elders about it. And of course, I told you about our particular faith background and what's believed along those lines. And I had thought that perhaps telling the story to my leadership would be a blessing, and um, that it would be something that they would like to hear that God is still doing. And
Like, wow, we know this man. So if
yeah,
he's telling us these things happen.
and I was let go immediately there. And then I was actually out of ministry for about 5 years after that, through the time that I was writing the book. And then during that time, I was building a business, digital marketing business. And I had gotten to a place where I thought that that maybe I wasn't supposed to be doing full-time ministry anymore. But long story short, in 2014, I wound up working with another Church of Christ up here in Gallatin, Tennessee, and had disclosed the book. I remember letting them, read the manuscript, and told them that I'm not a typical Church of Christ guy. I'm just not. And, you know, I believe in the Holy Spirit. I believe that God still speaks today. And, you know, one of the central things that is part of my ministry now is teaching other people how to hear God's voice for themselves and for their own lives. And that originally was welcome at the congregation, but during the 6 years that I was a minister there, I was not allowed to speak about any of these things regarding the book. And so, after several more instances of hearing God, especially through the time of the coronavirus, I wound up talking openly about it in January of 2020, and I was fired again for the second time. So my wife and I have been out of work, or I've been out of work now for the last few months. So we're back in the same boat again.
Well,
Man.
well, that part of the story reminds me of. I mean, I'm not comparing your faith to anybody else's by any means, but the similarities to you've heard of Lakewood Church and Joel Osteen and whatnot, but his father, John Osteen, was let go from his church in the 50s, because I think it was the 50s, because their daughter was born with something they said like cerebral palsy, and he started praying, and he read the Bible and saw that God still heals, and so he went back and told the congregation that, hey, God still heals, and they said, all right, we'll see you later, we don't believe that, let you go.
That's right.
And so now,
Mhm.
how many ever years later, and you can say what you want to about the Lakewood Church and Joel Osteen's ministry, you know, and I understand that it's flawed in some ways, just like all humans. But look where how far. All I'm saying is, look where he's gone to now, and you know, it's just a really comparative to me that seems to be a recurrent theme in religion, where people seem to like believe more in their denomination and the religion instead of believing in the Christ and the Bible and
Right.
they
put God in a box.
right.
That's exactly right.
And so, what do you do now? What are we doing now to make a living? Do you have? I believe you have a home based, where you're at least a digital based business of some
I
sort.
do. Yes, I own a small digital marketing company called Four Streams Marketing, and we work with contractors mainly doing lead generation and web design and SEO for them. And you know, it squeezes the lemon a little bit here and there, so helps pay a little bit.
God just provides at just the right times. I mean, it literally will be like, oh, are we going to make rent this month? And God's like, yep, yes, you are. And that's what's incredible about our story and God and the journey that we're on right now is, again, God is like, you know, you did what I asked you to do, so I'm going to reward you. I'm going to take care of you.
And I
think that's all about not fearing men, rather like fearing God rather than men, you know, respecting what God is showing us, and what my husband stood up and said, you know, I believe in the work of the Holy Spirit. I've seen it in my life, and I can't be silent about it anymore. And he even spoke that, you know, in his recent ministry video that he did. And I think because of that, God, it's hard, but God is like, just you wait. Like, you know, it's gonna work out.
Well, Stephen, I know we're going along, but I'll just say this really quick, and I'll be quiet. God spent from 2009 to 2010. He said, you're going to need your whole heart for what's coming, and then he spent that entire next year preparing us, giving us various lessons on faith that would basically be a blueprint for what we were going to walk through for the next couple of years. And then after we went through all of that, God spent the next 5, 6, 7, 8 years teaching us what it meant to walk with a whole heart, becoming wholehearted for God. And during the time of the last 6 years that we were on assignment at this particular place in up here in Gallatin, God hasn't stopped speaking. He has continued giving dreams, continued giving visions, continued showing fingerprints. I always knew a long time ago that God was going to have me write a follow-up book called A Faith That Moves Mountains, What Happens When Faith Finds the Miraculous. And that is actually going to be the book that I'm going to write next, and it will detail the last 11 years of our journey.
Oh, that's amazing. And that was in my, strangely enough, that was in my notes if there was going to be a follow-up to talk about the rest of the journey and the continued journey. And what kind of faith are you, or what kind of ministry do you have today? And is there any place people can see something that, see some of your ministry, some of your preaching, some of your teaching, some of your
It just started actually when I was when we were let go in January. It took me a few months to pray through it all, but we actually started a brand new ministry called Kingdom Gathering, and you can find it at kingdomgathering.org. And right now it's basically a teaching ministry, and we also are starting discipleship ministry. We have a couple of groups, one that we've started in Pakistan, one that we've started in Nigeria, and it's basically it's just going back to the words of Christ and making disciples the way he talked about making disciples, and basically choosing to live life by the Holy Spirit. So this is where I plan to have a lot of teachings regarding the Holy Spirit and how people can learn to hear God for themselves and walk in their own divine destiny that God has for their lives, and also to join in disciple making, because Jesus chose 12 guys and he instilled in those 12 guys, and those 12 guys turned the world upside down. And that's what our heart is about from this point forward. That's going to what our ministry looks like is creating discipleship groups.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kingdomgathering.org.
Kingdomgathering.org.
And there's some, I know that I've seen a few of the videos on YouTube, I believe.
Yeah.
And that's really, really powerful stuff. I haven't gotten really deep into it yet, but I will, and I plan on it, because you're just such you seem to follow the voice that I believe the voice of God, and I believe you're, taking that where it's leading you, and where God is showing you the need is in this world, into helping other people find Jesus or find God. And just it's such an honor and a pleasure talking to you both. I'm totally at awe and grateful for the time you spent with us talking about the journey, the accident, and I highly recommend. I can't recommend it enough. The book "God Still Speaks: The Miracle at Fall Creek Falls." I believe it's what's the best way to get it? I believe it's available at Amazon.
It is available at Amazon. However, we offer it through the ministry free of charge. So if you just go to kingdomgathering.org, you will see. Right now, it just goes to our YouTube channel, and we don't even have a website up yet. But if you go to, I'll give you another URL, and it'll take you straight to the book. But it's GodStillSpeaksBook.com.
And Caleb will sign the book too. That's what's amazing. Tim and Caleb will sign that book. That's what's amazing about not buying it necessarily off of Amazon, but getting it through us. The only thing that we've asked for is what, shipping and handling, Tim?
Just shipping and handling. Yeah.
And I will say that I ordered one directly from you guys, and Caleb signed my book, and it almost
doing that.
That's great.
It almost made me cry just looking at the seeing that he signed it, and knowing what all he's been through, and your whole family. It's not. I know he went through the blunt of the trauma, but any kind of accident like that, the whole family goes through it, the extended family. And you guys have been such a blessing and amazing, very well spoken, very the story is just amazing. I'm in awe. I can't believe, I'm actually a little in awe that I got to speak to you, because I really think that you guys are very specially blessed people, and you're gonna keep touching the world. And I think you're just at the the tip of the iceberg as far as changing the world. I can't help but
Wow.
believe that.
Wow.
And I
believe that.
think you're going to do great things. I think you have great
I
things in
know.
you. And go ahead.
I'm so sorry. I was just gonna
Yeah.
say, I know we need to go, but there's something that the Lord is really laying on my heart that I feel like I at least have to say before we end. And
Sure.
and that is because people listening to this, they hear, this is what happened in 2009, 2010, 2011. These are the things that took place in their marriage or their family, and not just Caleb's journey, but I just want people to know out there that when you are choosing the things of God, the enemy attacks. There is great spiritual warfare, and so we have to continue to choose truth through it. We have to continue to work at our marriage, and it wasn't a one and done deal. Back in 2010, when we came to that turnaround, that was just one turnaround. That the enemy does not stop. He constantly wants to still kill and destroy. So I don't want people to think that, oh wow, they have this like butterflies and rainbow life now other than Caleb. No. It's constant attacks. But the Lord is so good to remind us, hey, this is where I have brought you so you can get through this too.
Daily choice to walk by faith. Daily choice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Well, is there any? I mean, you're absolutely welcome to add anything you want, because I could sit here and listen to you guys all night.
Well, that was
I
it. That was just
absolutely-
something where I felt like the Lord was like, people need to know that just because you go through something one time does not mean it's done. It's
right.
We live in a fallen world, and
Well, there is one other thing we always. I don't know why we always do this, but we've got two people here, and I always want to add this, and we always usually ask this, and it's silly, but it's always relatable. What was your first vehicle? What was your first car? I don't know why we've always asked this.
Completely way off topic.
Yeah, and it doesn't relate to anything, but it always makes for.
So you've got to hear the stud that I was when I was dating my wife. Are you ready for this?
Here we go.
I gotta let you, Tiffany, go ahead and tell them what I drove to pick you up on our date.
Well, I can't remember the model, but it was a station wagon. It
was a 1986 Oldsmobile station wagon. We could put the whole youth group in that thing.
Oh, but did it have wood grain siding?
It had the wood grain siding.
Yes, it did.
Oh my gosh! Did it have the seats in the back that faced backwards?
Yeah, the reverse seats in them.
That's it, brother.
Oh yeah.
Oh wow. That is incredible.
You know what? I didn't care. I was enthralled by the driver, so that didn't matter to me. But
that is beautiful.
My dad was into old cars, so the first car that he bought me was a '57 Chevrolet, black and white '57 Chevrolet, and so I loved that car, but I didn't get to take it with me once I left the house. He was like, "Yep, this is my car." So,
does he still have it?
Does he still have it? He had it for a long time, but honestly, I do not remember if he still has it. I mean, he had it up until a few years ago, so I'm not sure if he still has it or not, because he liked to tinker with cars and stuff. But but then my car that I bought myself was a Honda Accord.
Oh, see, that's sensible, reasonable.
Yeah, it was a good car. Mm-hmm.
What year was that? What year was the Honda Accord?
I want to say it was in 1990.
Yeah, it was early model 90 or something like that.
Yeah, somewhere around there, 1994 maybe.
My second car was a 1984 Honda Accord. So my first car was a little, I don't know, I would say it was worse than a station wagon. My first car was a 1980 model Chevette.
Oh,
and you may not even know.
Yes.
Yeah. Little bitty piece of not good car, and it was all I could afford. But it was fun though. It was,
That's awesome.
it was something that most people today, well, most of the kids today can't drive. It was a stick shift. It was
Yep.
the 4-speed. So
Yeah.
That's right.
how-
Oh yeah.
One thing that I
yes,
wanted to say too, that you had said something to the effect of especially blessed. That's one thing that I have heard, and I've heard many times. I remember somebody said to me once, why do you think God spoke audibly to you that first time in 2009? And I said, well, knowing the kind of guy that I was, sometimes you have to raise your voice at your kids to make them listen.
Mm.
right.
And because I was not listening, and I didn't know how to listen. But one of the most important things that I've learned through this whole journey is that it's not that we were special in the sense that we were able to hear God's voice and go through some of these miraculous experiences. It's that we have a very special God who wants to connect with all of his children, and he has allowed us the grace to go through what we've gone through so that we can now turn around and say, hey, listen, that same God wants to speak to you. God still
Amen.
speaks. God
Amen.
still speaks. And
Amen.
that's what our whole life has been about since then, is just helping people get to know this God better, this incredible God that we worship.
Yeah. Amen.
Amen. Amen. I think that's a great place to end on. Josh, are we doing okay? We got enough content? Are we doing okay on time?
Oh yeah, we're doing good.
She's like, yeah, we're
Okay.
gonna have to cut a lot.
Well, no, not really. We've got an hour and about an hour and 30 recorded on this. So
Yeah,
well,
and I think
it all
I think it's
flowed
gonna be
real
great.
well. So I don't think I'll have to cut it up too much. I'll be in there.
Except when I started asking about cars.
Well,
Yeah.
we just got to cut the stick
Hey,
shift
you
out
gotta
of it.
Now,
throw some humor in there somewhere.
Yeah,
It's true, though. I
exactly.
never did learn
yeah.
stick shift. My wife is right about that. So
That was one reason why we did that.
Oh,
We put that in on every episode. It just kind of completely off topic and make people say, "Oh yeah, I remember my car."
That's funny.
The good old days.
and I do have a little joke that I'm working on, but I want to test it out on you guys.
okay.
True story. We saw a praying mantis, and my son had never seen one, so my dad wanted to show Luke the praying mantis up there, and so I said, "Luke, what do you think?" And he doesn't talk very great to this point, and he's like, "Ooh, bug, or something to that effect." And I was like, and so I said, "Hey, let's go around and look for another, and let's see if we can find one of those heathen mantises that don't pray." That's it. So yeah.
Oh
So
my
like
goodness.
there we
There
go.
you go,
There.
right
man.
in there.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Hey, I'm learning to be the king of the dad jokes. So.
That's
Oh
awesome.
man.
That's cool. Well,
But
it
anyway,
has been a pleasure and an honor.
Absolutely,
Oh,
oh
guys.
no,
Thank you so much.
We,
the
we
honor's
yeah,
all
that's what I
ours.
was gonna say. Appreciate y'all.
That story is beautiful, and I think this is the first time I've ever gotten emotional on the show, and I think it's definitely the first time I've ever shed tears talking about a situation.
Mhm.
But that's what's the great thing about the book is like I can I cried because it was heart wrenching, and then I cried because the outcome was getting better, and it was getting so great. It was just amazing. I mean, it's complete and total honor, and I'm blessed because I've read the book, and I appreciate you guys for that.
Well, thank you so much, and we're honored to be here and be a part of this show with you guys too. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you very much. I hope you guys have a great evening, and thanks you for so much for all your time. And it'll be, I don't know, we've got several episodes lined up, and it's going to be a little while before we get this one up and out. But I'll let you know. I mean,
Yeah.
so this
Yeah,
is
absolutely.
hopefully this will be probably one of our crown jewels for our second season. We've got
Okay.
several in the shoot. So I'm really excited. This was one of my favorites. by far.
Well, if
Well,
there's
thank you
anything
so
that you
much.
need, and let us know. We'll be there to help out.
Okay,
For sure,
great. Yeah,
for
if
sure.
I like I said, if I need to use, if I may ask if we can use the cover of the book or something just for online purposes and stuff, because I love the picture of the falls and Caleb and stuff. But we'll get to that whenever we start getting closer to putting it out. So
And
I'll message you.
I will have a web page up. I just haven't had a chance to build it yet, but I'm going to put a web page up just for the book itself. And
Okay, great.
people were getting it through Amazon, and that's fine if people want to do that. They charge a lot for the book, and they keep all the money. Like, we don't get anything from that.
Oh wow.
And
Really?
so, yeah, they keep like 90 something % of it or whatnot, and it makes it very convenient for people to get it. But at the same time, there's some people that don't really want to support Amazon, and I totally understand that too. So we offer it. We offer it free of charge. You can have it as an instant download. If you want to do an instant download, you can download the PDF and just read it. Or if you want the actual physical book, the only thing we ask for is just the cost for covering the material of the book itself. But we don't charge any profit for it. So.
Yeah, that's great.
Absolutely.
Thank you guys so
Actually,
much.
yeah. Oh, yeah. No, thank you.
Thank
Give
you
all the
very
kids
much.
big hugs for us and just thank you for sharing. Thank you very much.
Yep,
Absolutely.
no doubt. All right, y'all have a good one.
All right.
All right.
Yeah,
God
good
bless you.
night.
Good night.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye. What'd you think, Josh?
Man, a very interesting story there.
It is. It
No
is.
doubt.
I like them. I like them. I think they're good folk.
Man, that is an incredible story. Sure to appreciate the time of Timothy and Tiffany Brown. Look them up on Facebook. Timothy Brown. I believe Tiffany Brown's on there too. Contact them. Get the book from them. It's an amazing read. It's really good stuff, and I just wish the best for them, and hope that the son continues a full recovery. Is really good. Any final thoughts today, Josh?
Oh man, just like you said, get the book from them. Don't go through the big website.
Yeah, because if you get it from them, it's basically, I think they'll give it to you free. But I always like to say, give them a donation or something if you can, because that's really how he's partially how he makes his money and supports his family. So, and it's worth it. I mean, I love the book myself. I thought it was fantastic. But let's wrap it up. We are Two Likeable Guys. I'm Steve. This is my awesome, amazing co-host,
Josh.
We appreciate you listening. We hope you have a great day. You can reach us. You come visit us at TwoLikeableGuys.com, or just send us an email. Tell us what you think. If you send us an email and you need some more information about something on the show, we'll get back to you with it. TwoLikeableGuys@gmail.com. We have a Facebook and Instagram page. We're doing great things, and we have more exciting shows lined up. I mean, the guests are getting bigger and better, and we're blessed with everything we're doing, and we really appreciate you listening. So we like you, and we hope you like us too.